You ever sit down to a plate of fish thinking this must be the healthiest choice and wonder if you might be missing something important? I did for years, and I am here to tell you that while fish can be a hero for heart and brain health, some species hide risks that become more serious after age 60. I remember the moment I realized this was not just a cautionary headline, but a family issue we had to change. And today I will walk you through 6 dangerous fish that seniors should avoid or limit, explain why each one is problematic for older adults, and offer practical, tasty alternatives that preserve omega-3 benefits without risking chronic exposure to mercury, PCBs, or antibiotics. If you are caring for a parent, a partner, or you are over 60, this information can protect memory, nerves, and cardiovascular health. Before we dive in, write "I am here" in the comments so I know this message reached you. And if you want more practical advice, subscribe to the channel for straightforward tips you can use at the next family meal. Now let me tell you briefly who I am and why this matters to me, and to you. I grew up with fish on the table every Sunday, a ritual that meant more than food. I trained as a nutrition educator, watched decades of research evolve, and I lost a close aunt to steadily worsening memory decline that puzzled the family, until a nutrition review connected long-term heavy metal exposure to her symptoms. I learned how kidneys and liver change as we age, and how the body stores toxins. I also learned the comfort of familiar flavors and the importance of keeping them without harm. Those experiences shaped my calling to help seniors and caregivers make safer, delicious choices at the grocery store and the restaurant. Think of this as a friendly but urgent guide. Item 1 is Big Eye tuna, which often shows up in sushi bars and on premium canned tuna labels and is a classic example of a food that seems healthy but can carry high mercury levels. Picture this scene in my kitchen. The light of the evening hitting a glossy tuna steak, a faint ocean smell, the soft thickness of the flesh in your hand, the hush of conversation at the table, the sharp soy sauce tang as you taste the first bite. Maria, my neighbor, says she orders Big Eye because it tastes robust and premium. I say to her, quote, "Do you know how much mercury is in that fish today?" And she replies, quote, "I trust the menu, and my doctor said fish is good, so it must be fine." Dr. Patel, a local geriatrician, chimes in, quote, "For seniors, we worry because mercury accumulates over decades and affects the nervous system." Maria asks, quote, "But how does that translate into memory problems or tremors?" And Dr. Patel answers, quote, "Mercury binds to neural tissue and over time can worsen cognitive decline and coordination in people whose kidneys clear toxins less efficiently." Maria nods and says, quote, "So what should I order instead?" And Dr. Patel says, quote, "Choose canned light tuna or smaller tuna species occasionally and ask for wild salmon or sardines for omega-3s. The dialogue above is one of 6 exchanges, so you feel the back and forth. The science is clear from FDA and EPA advisories and EFSA reviews that larger predatory fish like Big Eye accumulate mercury through biomagnification. For seniors especially, the risk rises because chronic exposure can add to age-related decline in clearance by kidneys and liver and can affect immune response. The practical alternative is canned light tuna in moderation, which tends to be lower in mercury, or smaller fatty fish like sardines and anchovies that provide omega-3 without the heavy metal burden. Item 2 is swordfish, which often appears on steak-style menus and at celebratory dinners. Imagine a summer barbecue, grill heat radiating, the sizzling sound of a swordfish steak hitting the grates, the charred aroma mixing with lemon and garlic, a fork pressing into meat that flakes slowly, the metallic aftertaste that makes conversation pause. At one family reunion, John, my cousin, insisted on ordering swordfish because he wanted something special. I asked him quietly, "Have you thought about mercury for Mom?" And he looked up, surprised, and replied, quote, "She eats fish every week. She needs protein." I said, quote, "Exactly, which makes swordfish a risky choice because it is a top predator and concentrates mercury." John asked, quote, "How fast would it affect her?" And I answered, quote, "It is not instant, but chronic exposure over months and years increases risk of memory loss and may aggravate heart rhythm issues in vulnerable seniors."
The alternative is grilled wild salmon or baked cod, which are lower in mercury and still offer satisfying texture and flavor. Scientific data from multiple studies and statements by Anvisa and FDA back the advice to limit swordfish, especially for vulnerable populations. Item 3 is king mackerel, a fish that shows up on many coastal menus and in holiday spreads. Close your eyes and picture the fish on a platter, glossy skin catching light, the sound of cutlery, the salt spray on your lips from a seaside dinner, the oil-rich mouthfeel that makes you slow down to savor each bite. Family friend Carla told me how she used to love king mackerel at her beachside dinners until a nutrition clinic flagged it for her husband, who is 67. Carla said, quote, "It tasted so free and fresh. How could it be wrong?" And I told her, quote, "The problem is bioaccumulation of mercury and sometimes PCBs in larger fish." Carla asked, quote, "What are PCBs and how do they matter now?" And I answered, quote, "PCBs are industrial pollutants that persist in fat tissue and can affect liver function and immunity over long-term exposure." Carla frowned and said, quote, "So what can replace that rich, oily texture?" And I suggested, try farmed trout, or smaller wild fish like mackerel from sustainable sources, or sardines that are lower in heavy metals. Research summarized by universities and government reports highlights king mackerel as a high mercury species and a poor choice for seniors who face detoxification capacity. Item 4 may surprise you because it is farmed salmon, which many people assume is safer because it is labeled and sold as premium. Picture a cold case at the supermarket, the sound of the fluorescent lights, the bright orange fillets packed neatly, a faint chemical smell from ice and processing, the silky texture that spreads across a plate, the comforting taste that seems healthy. Miguel, my neighbor, told me how he switched to farmed salmon to save money and because it is always available in his market. I asked Miguel, quote, "Do you check where it was raised?" And he shrugged, "It is labeled farmed salmon, so I assumed safe." I then asked, quote, "Did you know farmed salmon can have higher levels of PCBs and be treated with antibiotics, and that farming methods affect contamination levels and omega-3 composition?" And Miguel paused and said, "I did not realize that the method of farming changes the safety, and Dr. Patel had warned me that farmed fish may contain residues that accumulate in fat and might interact with medications common in seniors." He asked, "What should we pick then?" And I recommended, look for certified responsibly farmed labels, or choose wild-caught salmon when possible, and diversify with sardines and mackerel. This scene includes the dialogue exchanges, so you hear the push and pull. The science is nuanced. Farmed salmon can be a good source of omega-3, but some production systems lead to higher PCBs or antibiotic use, depending on region and feed. Agencies like FDA and IFSA monitor residues and recommend informed choices and rotation. Item 5 is imported catfish and certain cheap fillets that sometimes slip into budget menus. Imagine a cafeteria light hum, the thin plastic tray heat, the soft texture that seems bland on purpose, a faint riverbank mud note, the sticky breading from frying, the polite hum of conversation. Nurse Ellen told me about residents in a care facility who would ask for the budget fillet every week until we reviewed sourcing. She said, quote, "It was a staple because it is inexpensive, but several nurses reported more gastrointestinal complaints, and we found inconsistent origin labeling." I asked, quote, "Were antibiotics or contaminants a concern?" And she answered, "Some imports have had issues with antibiotic residues and variable farming standards." The advice here is to choose verified sources, prefer domestic or certified suppliers, and consider canned light tuna and sardines as economical, safe choices. Item 6 is tilefish, a less common but very high mercury fish that can slip into party platters or seafood assortments.
Whitefish. Picture a buffet table, the clink of plates, the bland white flesh that looks innocuous under sauce, the distant clatter of glasses, the subtle fishy scent that does not appear strong. Chef Louise once offered tilefish as a special, and my Aunt Maria unknowingly ate several pieces. Later at a clinic review, we found a pattern of dizziness and cognitive slowing that prompted testing and a dietary history.
Dr. Patel explained, quote, "Tilefish lives long and accumulates mercury more than smaller species, so seniors should avoid it." Chef Louise asked, quote, "What should we add to our menu that gives similar satisfaction?" And I suggested, quote, "Offer baked cod with herb crust or monkfish from trusted suppliers for a meatier texture but lower mercury risk." These 6 items each represent common situations where taste, tradition, and convenience collide with contamination risks in a way that matters more to older bodies. At this point, pause and breathe, because this can feel overwhelming, and that is normal. If this surprised you, please know you are not alone, and many families learn and adapt with a few practical steps. Now I want to hear from you. If this information made you pause and rethink tonight's dinner, write in the comments one word or the phrase, "I am here," so we know this reached people who care. Tell me briefly which fish your family eats most often. Start your reply with "on my table" and the fish name. Sharing helps others see patterns, and I will use your comments to make follow-up videos answering real questions. Commenting also creates a community where caregivers exchange safe recipes and sources. I read every comment and sometimes make videos that directly respond to concerns people share. Now take a moment to ground this in concrete actions you can take immediately. First, look for labeled origin and choose wild-caught or responsibly farmed certifications when buying salmon. Second, favor smaller oily fish like sardines, anchovies, herring, and canned light tuna for regular omega-3 intake. Third, rotate species to avoid chronic accumulation of any single contaminant. Fourth, cook seafood thoroughly when appropriate, and ask about sourcing and farming practices at restaurants. Fifth, consult a physician or registered dietitian if someone is on medications, has kidney or liver disease, or shows new cognitive or neurological symptoms. The science underpinning these recommendations is straightforward. Mercury and other heavy metals accumulate up the food chain, so larger predatory fish contain more. PCBs are persistent organic pollutants that concentrate in fat and can affect liver and immune function over years of chronic exposure. Antibiotic residues and variable farming practices can introduce other risks in some imported or intensive farmed systems. Agencies such as FDA, EPA, EFSA, and AMVISA publish advisories and maximum residue limits that guide safe consumption, and recent studies in geriatric nutrition emphasize lower tolerance to cumulative toxins in seniors. Now I must share 2 candid moments of tension I have witnessed because
these are the crossroads where choices change lives. The first moment came when my aunt sat across from me and held a fork of her favorite fish, a special she had eaten for decades, and I had to tell her we needed to change her portion and frequency. Her face registered surprise, then sadness, then resolve, as she asked, quote, "Will I lose taste of my childhood dinners?" And I answered, quote, "You will keep the memory, and most flavors we can substitute safely." That room was quiet, except for the cutlery, the faint hum of the refrigerator, and the small sound of the air conditioning popping as it cooled. That decision weighed on all of us because it meant altering family ritual and learning new recipes. The second moment of tension happened at a care facility meeting where Nurse Ellen raised the chart of an 82-year-old man with new tremors and cognitive slowing and asked whether diet review could be part of the diagnostic plan. Dr. Patel looked at the labs and said, quote, "We cannot ignore environmental exposures in seniors, and it may take months to see change." The conversation was urgent and soft at the same time, and we had to balance medical testing with gentle dietary transition so the man would accept change without feeling punished. These moments often last in memory and are the reason my guidance is practical and compassionate. Let us name some of the people who help make safer choices possible so you can picture a network of support. Maria, my neighbor, who became an advocate at her church. John, my cousin, who monitors family meals. Dr. Patel, the geriatrician who advises on testing. Carla, the community nutritionist who hosts cooking classes. Miguel, the market manager who improved sourcing. Nurse Ellen, who tracks resident diets and long-term care. Chef Luis, who adjusted menus to safer fish. Each of them plays a concrete role you can emulate when you ask questions at the market, restaurant, or clinic. To recap, in a practical checklist, choose smaller fish for weekly meals, prefer canned light tuna and sardines, diversify species, check labels for origin and responsible certification, ask restaurants about sourcing, cook when appropriate, and consult your doctor or a registered dietitian if you have kidney, liver, or neurological concerns. If you liked this content and want to keep learning, subscribe for evidence-based tips that turn into simple habits, and share this video with someone who eats fish every week, because small changes prevent big problems. Finally, let us look ahead with an epilogue in 3 time frames to imagine the impact of choosing smarter fish. In 1 month, you will have already made a few small swaps, perhaps switching 2 weekly meals from a high mercury fish to canned light tuna or sardines. You may notice fewer worries at the grocery store as you start asking where fish was sourced and whether it is wild or farmed responsibly. Family members often comment on how these conversations become teaching moments and that you feel empowered by questions rather than scared of labels. In 3 months, these small changes compound. You will likely have rotated species more often, tried at least 3 new safe recipes, and maybe spoken to your doctor about screening if there were concerns. Family dinners shift subtly from habit to mindful choice, and your loved one may feel noticed in a positive way because food becomes an act of care that preserves comfort without increasing risk. Clinically subtle signs such as steadier energy between meals and fewer digestive complaints sometimes appear and motivate continued attention. In 6 months, the cumulative effect is clearer. You and your household will have adopted a set of habits you do almost without thinking. Check origin, prefer smaller fatty fish, time portions, and consult professionals when in doubt. Those habits reduce chronic exposure risks and help maintain cognitive and cardiovascular resilience. You may not notice a dramatic overnight change because these risks are insidious, but over time, lower exposure supports better long-term health for seniors and peace of mind for everyone who cares for them. Keep in mind that we do not ask you to eliminate all fish, but to choose smarter so that the benefits of omega-3 and protein are preserved while minimizing mercury, PCBs, antibiotic residues, and other contaminants. Small, consistent choices produce big outcomes. Caring is choosing better, 1 plate at a time. If this video helped you, please comment. I am here, share with someone who eats fish every week, and subscribe for more practical guidance that blends science and compassion.